So the concept here, we're going to introduce digital service efficiency, and I'll explain more about that as I get through this. But I want to show you a transaction or a purchase that happened on eBay 3 days ago. So this is a 2003 Ferrari Enzo, very rare yellow. It sold for almost $1.7 million on the site. Okay, so we sell over 9,000 cars a week now. 9,000 cars a week through mobile devices only. There's a significant amount of purchases going on. We sell 450,000 car parts a week. There's huge volumes that go back through eBay. And if you haven't used the eBay Motors app, download it. It is the coolest thing if you're a gearhead. Okay, I'm telling you, or if you're just trying to get your car fixed. So this car, the person that went back and purchased this in Texas somewhere, as you can see on the actual transaction, they had a motivation for buying this car. I would assume, first off, they have a lot of disposable income that they could use to be able to purchase something like this. I doubt I could afford something like that. But I'm sure they're looking for performance. They may not be measuring the miles per gallon or anything else. So they're looking for a performance engine. And what we're introducing today is very much like this. Not that we're spending exorbitant amounts of money to go back and buy a car, but we're trying to build the most efficient engine possible for eBay. So, digital service efficiency. What is it? Digital is anything delivered electronically via a service, and the efficiency of that service delivered electronically. Everything that eBay does is electronic. It can be measured. So let me set the stage first off of what this metric is about. It is the miles per gallon measurement for eBay's technical infrastructure. Miles per gallon measurement. It is the way we're going to measure the performance of our engine, our car, which is eBay.com. And it measures it as a single system. So imagine all the servers, the data centers, the software, the processes, the engineers, the coding, all of this rolls into one engine, which is eBay.com. And now we have a way to measure ourselves about how efficiently and effective that engine is being used. We're tuning the engine's performance based on our user consumption. So just like with a car, when you drive it, it's not about what it's designed to do, it's how you drive it to see what kind of miles per gallon you get, and how you drive the car for performance. We're measuring and tuning our engine based on the user consumption, all of our active users consuming the services on our site. And I want to make sure it's really clear. Thank you for the green grid for allowing us to debut this here. I'm on the advisory council, and we do a lot of work inside to try and really get our arms around how to measure things and how to drive efficiency, drive productivity. And this is one of our ways to go back and share what we're seeing inside of our company. We're sharing the methodology to do two things. Give everybody access to our data to use as a case study, and then drive the actual dialogue with the industry. We're not saying this is the way everybody should measure everything. We're saying this is the way we're measuring ourselves, and we're setting goals against ourselves to go back and show the year-over-year, quarter-over-quarter performance gains that we're getting with our technical infrastructure. Again, keep the car analogy in mind. This is all about trying to tune what your engine is doing. All right? So, let me start from 3 years ago. It was literally March in 2010 that I sat down with a group of executives at eBay. And for those of you who know me, I get really excited about technology and all the things that we do. And I said, look at what we're doing in data centers. Man, we got this plan to go after here. Look what we're doing in servers. Look what we're doing in the network side. And I'm talking to the EVP of communications. I'm talking to our CTO and other leaders inside of the company. And they're saying, that's great. That's great. Data centers. Okay. We connect buyers and sellers. Great. Okay. And there just wasn't that connection. And what came from it is Alan Marks is our EVP of communications. Okay, we call him Mr. Clean because he's bald. But Alan really pushed at that point. He said, you know, this is great. I love all the stuff that's happening here, but you need to up-level the conversation. We talk about data centers. Great. What does it mean to the company? What does it mean to the actual business? What does it mean to our cost? You need to up-level those conversations. So besides being very frustrated of not being able to talk about what's going on and connect it, I really went back with my team and we started thinking through what that actual challenge meant. What does it mean to up-level the conversation? So we started thinking about it a little more. And it really was, you got to tell the complete story. So what I mentioned in the beginning, eBay.com is a single system. It's a sum of a million parts, millions of parts. How do you actually see that, just like you would in a car, to see how the performance is going and what you're going to do to tune that? So we need to tell the entire story with what the infrastructure is doing for the business itself. And we need a simple way to actually measure it and convey it back to our executive staff. What is the productivity? What is happening? What is the useful work for everyone who's done years worth of work on useful work within the green grid? What is the useful work happening inside of our engine serving our customers outside? So a simplified way to do that. And the last one is we need a definable and actionable metric-driven measurement strategy so that we can actually now decide this is what we have as a baseline, here's what we're going to do as a strategy, here's how we measure what the results were from that strategy. Pretty simple. Like any measurement methodology, you need to have a baseline and need to move forward with it. So it started a 3-year journey from that conversation to up-level it. Now, I'm going to walk you through a stack. We've been doing a whole bunch of work, and you guys have seen the paper that came out from Project Mercury, or many of you guys have, that we started talking about what we did from software to hardware to data centers to right-sizing tiers and all the different elements inside of the infrastructure. So we had a lot of things going on in the data center. Right, multi-tier, modularity, density, all types of things to be able to enable the business to grow quickly. We also had a lot of challenges and a lot of things we're addressing from a power sourcing standpoint. How do we get the cleanest commerce engine on the planet? How do you get yourself as much clean energy to fuel every transaction possible? Okay, 2 big problems. We got to figure out how we get the right power. We now need to make sure we're actually building and operating the most efficient data centers. So we did a lot of work on that already. Then we were having conversations about the IT infrastructure. This is the servers. So other things that we've done, of course, is consolidate our SKUs, our configurations, and we pretty much addressed 80% of the hardware that we had, dropped 15 of those SKUs down to 2, and now we're buying just a supply chain of standard hardware that rolls in. And we've got density in packaging, so we're using less equipment to do the same work. So we're doing a lot around the IT infrastructure, and we started really pushing the envelope looking at how we can do high temp cooling in Arizona for free cooling year round. We're looking at liquid cooling to the things. We're looking at overclocking. The point is the IT equipment. How do we turn the knobs for the IT equipment? The next one is software. So we started doing some right sizing of our applications within our data centers. Okay, work that was happening already. Do we really need Tier 4 for everything? We don't. We found that up to 80% of our applications would work fine in Tier 2 because they can just switch over to another data center without losing data. Why are we building Tier 4 everything? So then we started adjusting that. We're addressing the cost within it, right-sizing the applications to make sure our infrastructure isn't overbuilt and has excessive spend from it. But if you look at these 4 elements, this is the technical infrastructure. The 4 layers there make up everything that we're doing inside of our infrastructure. That looks pretty similar to, I would say, every data center in the world. They all have these elements they have to address. They have different things running in it, different server choices, different architectures, etc. But these are the main layers that they're addressing. Now think of the up-level of the conversation again. We've got the foundation of what the technical infrastructure definition is. But we need to know and understand what the demand is. So we started talking about services. If you think of eBay, in the most simple sense, people do 2 things on there. They buy things and they sell things. We sell a lot of them. They buy a lot of them. But those are the 2 services that all of our customers around the world consume. Everything else is a loaded cost to those 2 services. Search right now consumes almost 70% of our power infrastructure. But search is an enabler for buy. Search is an enabler for sell. So all of these components underneath should be a loaded number for the actual service. All right, so now we got a simple way to say this is what we do. Here's the demand coming in. Here's the infrastructure that's actually operating it. Up-level the conversation one further. Our C-suite, what do they care about? Well, they each have a different dimension they look at. So we started molding those. Our CFO cares about cost. Okay? He wants to drive that cost down. Our CTO cares about performance. He wants the most performance possible to get the best experience for our users. Our sustainability officer cares about the environmental impact of our infrastructure and that we're optimizing everything we can to lower the hit on the planet for what we do. Great. And all of them, including our CEO, care about revenue. What is generated? What's the productivity of this engine? Those 4 dimensions are the business KPIs, or the key performance indicators that they run and make all of us, run our business and make the decisions about our business on. So if you notice this stack, to up-level the conversation, we reverse the direction. Lots of us, I mean, probably the majority of people in the room in here have been thinking about the useful work on computers and trying to figure out how to measure it from the bottom up. We need it. There's lots and lots of metrics that add up to something that's going to be at the top. But we reversed it for ourselves and said, what do the business drivers, decision makers, actually do? They look at those indicators and make decisions for the business. So it's from the top down. So we started mapping everything back to the top. We tie those 4 business indicators back to the services we do, and then the productivity within the infrastructure. Notice I haven't talked about architecture. I haven't talked about anything inside of the infrastructure when it comes to the business. Do they care how you design your engine? Do they care what car you're driving? Do they care what server you buy? They don't. What they care about is it the most cost-efficient, highly productive engine that can deliver for our customers? So what we believe we found is a way to connect the business to the productivity of technical infrastructure. That's what the stack is representing. All right? Now let me just walk through a couple of these here. The top ones are like a Rubik's Cube. So think of it like this. I've got one side that's performance. I can get all the transactions and rev up my engine as fast as I want and solve this side of the Rubik's Cube. But if I don't solve this side of the Rubik's Cube, which is cost, it's going to cost me too much to run that engine. So I need to solve this side of performance and this side of cost. But at the same time, I need to solve the environmental impact side. Performance, cost, environmental impact. Then the final side is revenue. I need to balance all 4 of those. When you solve a Rubik's Cube, you have to think about all the sides. So think of this as technical infrastructure's ecosystem. Those 4 elements need to be balanced in this ecosystem so that we can optimize the performance that's actually happening inside of the infrastructure. That's one of my main points in this. That balanced ecosystem is very hard to try and define. Now I think we have it. And everything we're doing here, again, is how we're applying it to eBay. And I'm sharing this so that you guys can start your dialogue around the same thing. But those 4 measurements now back into the services. The other, again, 3 years and just tons and tons of conversations with tons of people, both inside the company and peer groups, in the advisory council, at Data Center Pulse Summit sessions, at just offline meetings with my peers. Right? We sat down and spent a ton of time, and Jeremy and I had led this back from 2010, Jeremy Rodriguez, and we pulled our hair out, trying to go back and figure out how to make all this work. I mean, I had so many conversations with people in this room about trying to get to how this is measured. So we found one thing that made the difference. We need a common denominator. A common denominator. All right. If you look at the services, first, for them, I needed a currency that was the same. For search, for sell and buy, when you a buy transaction is, I will go check out something. I found it, I'm looking for here, and then I check out. When I complete, that is one checkout. That checkout equates to a number of URL requests. So my currency now is URLs for buy. Search is, or sell is the same thing. A sell is a new item listed on eBay. That's the way our execs look at it. So checkouts and new listings. Great. Those translate into actual transactions, which are URLs. We suddenly had a common currency. And then, once we had the currency, that's the numerator, those are the transactions, we now tied it back to the power consumed in the data center. Kilowatt hours is the denominator. Transactions per kilowatt hour. It's just like the bill at your house. What you do in your house with your light bulbs, with your washing machines, too many gadgets, whatever, still goes back to the bill you're going to pay at the end of the month. Data centers are the same. The transactions that are happening here. So now I got transactions per kilowatt hour. All right? Once we had that denominator set, we suddenly had all the other layers that connected. So performance is transactions per kilowatt hour. Then we went to the cost. Well, flip. The transactions become the denominator. Cost per transaction. carbon per transaction, revenue per transaction, revenue per user, kilowatt hour per user, transactions per user, cost per server, revenue per server. Everything starts to connect because of that denominator and that standard measurement of a transaction. The useful work, all driven by consumption. It's a very important point here. We are not saying what the potential is of our infrastructure. We're saying this is how it's consumed, how it's driven, just like the car. This is it. Regardless of what happens in the industry, regardless of what happens to the economy, this is what our infrastructure is delivering. This is what our customers are consuming. So now we have the measurements there for us to be able to understand how that goes together. We are sharing in this forum the actual results for 2012 of this measurement. And I will tell you, we had 7.3 trillion transactions last year. 7.3 trillion. And let me define that. These are the buy and sell transactions that customers see. That 7.3 trillion transactions does not include all the shared infrastructure underneath. Guess what? All the shared infrastructure is a loaded cost to the transaction above. Your database calls, your network latency, your server counts, your back-end data analytics, all of it is now going to be a loaded cost into the transaction, which is a loaded cost to the cost, which is a loaded hit to the actual environmental impact. Everything ties together. Okay, that's the introduction to the concept. Now, just like that car, this is what I'm really excited about, drum roll. It's a dashboard. It looks like a car. It's real. This is captured off the website that we're launching here at 9:30. 9:30 this morning, dse.ebay.com. This will be there. Now, there's a lot of numbers in here. I'm going to walk through them really quick because you might be surprised at what we're actually sharing. But our investor relations team was actually very happy with this. In the middle, at the very top, so digital service efficiency, again, measuring the efficiency of the services that we deliver electronically as DSE. Performance is selected right now. 2012, baseline results. The middle one is we had 45,914 transactions per kilowatt hour last year, average. Is that good? Don't know. There's nothing to baseline against. We're baselining that for ourselves. Again, we've got a goal that we'll sell at the end here of how we're going to increase that. If you look in the bottom part, there's the buy transactions per kilowatt hour. There's the sell transactions per kilowatt hour. They all add up into the total transactions per kilowatt hour. What's interesting in this is the services can change, which they will. Businesses change. The transactions underneath, the common currency, is what's important. Then we can still continuously measure. We add a third service, wonderful. Still is the total amount of transactions for the power consumed in the data center. Still comes back to the cost per transaction, carbon per transaction, and the revenue generated from every transaction that's there. So that's the center component. And if you look on the left, remember the way the stack was? Energy supplied. If you notice, it says owned, clean, and grid. We had a whole bunch of debate about this. Whole bunch. But the bottom line is we cannot take credit for anything that the grid is doing from a clean energy standpoint. What we're taking credit for is net new clean energy that we consume. That's why it's zero at the moment. For those of you who have followed some of the things we've been doing, we've installed solar on our data center in Utah. It took a year to get the interconnect to the utility for it to actually take the power. It didn't happen last year. We installed it and waited. So I don't have any credit for that one. We are doing the Bloom fuel cells. We're replacing generators and UPS with fuel cells as primary power on site for phase 2 of our data center in Utah. Excellent. It's not live yet. So we can't take credit for that either. This is literally the baseline for 2012. We are 100% grid fed. All right? So the source of energy, where it's coming from, is the first bottom left. Then you go into the data center effectiveness. This is where the green grid metrics are applied. These are real numbers, average for the year, of our entire portfolio. Good, bad, right or wrong, whatever you think, this is it. These are our numbers. That is PUE, average across of our data center, 1.57 for the year. If you look at the chart underneath, that little line, that's actually the trend over time. Every one of them has a trend under them except for the cost part. So PUE is reduced throughout the year. We're constantly driving it down. WUE, now we're releasing all of the water usage effectiveness numbers. This is the entire portfolio. And carbon usage effectiveness, CUE, at the same time. Now we have a way to see the energy source to the data center effectiveness. Now at the top, this is the user consumption. We had 112.3 million active users last year. Those 112.3 million users consumed 18.04 megawatts of constant power. They drew that for the year. That was the average for the year. That 18 megawatts was now running 52,075 servers. We're releasing our server counts. This is the total count of servers, active and inactive, in service, out of service, in our portfolio. The only thing not in that number is the stuff being disposed, because it will be out of our portfolio. Right or wrong, efficient or inefficient, these are our numbers. We're setting our baseline. 52,000 servers is running eBay.com. Just so you know, we've doubled our capacity. We've doubled our demand, more than doubled it since I've been here in the last 3 years. And that number is still small relative to what's actually being produced. But we want to share the information. So the left side is all about the consumption of the infrastructure and the efficiency of the infrastructure. The right side is about the business indicators. So if you notice, there's revenue, cost, and carbon. We now are reversing the conversation of data centers are power-sucking, evil, carbon-killing, planet-killing things into they are the productivity engines for this economy. You heard about the digital economy. What if Google, Amazon, eBay, Apple, Microsoft, and the others did not exist and deliver the services they did? What would it look like today? The productivity of those engines is incredible. That's what we want to be able to show is we are generating $54 of, basically per user on our site. $54 is a share of their wallet. We're generating $116,000 for every server that we put in place. Not that we should have more servers. The point is we can see how productive each server is. And then $337 million for every megawatt. The point is use as few amount of megawatts as you can and make as much money as you can. Okay? From the revenue standpoint. Then, if you go to the carbon side, this is the actual carbon measurement. Notice on the other side, it's the supplied energy. But it is such a difficult calculation to try and figure out what the real environmental impact is of energy. But now we're using the e-grid and the way they're calculating that to say, this is our footprint from the 100% grid supplied. So now we can see that per user, 740 metric tons per million users, all lined up on the right. Then the last one is cost. You notice it's all zero. Everything in eBay is free. No, I'm kidding. The zeros are there because we can't share our actual dollar amounts, but what we can do is share our performance of cost reduction for each of these. We expect that our cost per user is going to go down, that our cost per server is going to go down, and that our cost per megawatt is going to go down. All right? That's the way the actual dashboard is set up. That's 2012. Now, if you notice, I can go to Q1 and see what the transactions and all the other things. You notice there's 16.39 megawatts worth of continuous power consumption in Q1. We had 39,317 servers by the exit of Q1. Okay, everything starts to add up. We made $14 a user in Q1. Then you go to Q2. You can see it goes up. Notice the bars on the bottom. Those are actual trends over the quarter for the transactions. So as we start going through the quarter, you can see the spike in holiday. That's October, November at the beginning, where lots of people buy stuff, and then it tails off as you go through the holiday season. So all the trends start to make sense. So that's the performance side. Then we flip into the environment. Here is the actual grams of carbon that are emitted per 1,000 transactions. And we can start to see it in every quarter the same way. Get the idea? Cost. Notice there's nothing there. Q1, we will show the actual reduction in cost percentage for users, servers, and megawatts. Then you start to look at revenue. Guess what? We made 85 cents for every 1,000 transactions on our site. That's the average for 2012. So as you start going through each of these, you can see what it means to our business executives. when they can look at a dashboard and see the productivity or the efficiency of the eBay engine. And they can start to now set goals like this. Publicly, we are going to set a multidimensional goal, and that is a 10% gain. We're going to have an increase in a 10% increase in the transactions per kilowatt hour on our site. We're going to have a 10% reduction in cost per transaction on our site. And then we're going to have a 10% reduction in carbon per transaction on our site. A 10% gain across our infrastructure. All right? By having this, that means we now need to have everyone in the organization start to think about how they're going to achieve this goal. We need to get there. We've got a lot of smart minds in the company. And I'd like to invite 4 of them up here if I could. Jeremy, Paul, Rohini, are you here? Ah, she was stuck in traffic. We'll see. Akra, come on up as well. Come on up and join me on stage, and we're going to start a conversation. All right. So Paul is my director of data center operations. He basically runs the data centers for eBay, the entire portfolio and all that power. You power-sucking guy, I can't believe you. You might want to turn that on. Okay. Jeremy runs the hardware engineering team, a new team in my group, and so he's responsible for that next layer. So Paul is responsible for the sourcing and the data center infrastructure. Okay. Jeremy is responsible for the selection of all the IT infrastructure, the unified technology roadmap for the next 3 years. Then Akra, is it right? Did I say that right? Akra. I met Akra today. He is a software developer. Okay? And guess who just came in? Rohini, join us on stage. Rohini is the controller, finance controller for eBay.com. She reports back into the CTO for all of the performance financially that we've got. These 4 people represent the layers in this stack. Each of us have a goal, and we have knobs that we can turn. So if you notice, I didn't tell them how to do it. I didn't tell them what you have to change in the server and the data center and the software or what we have to achieve financially. They're setting up the goals now, or they're setting up the reasons or the ways that we're going to go back and achieve these goals. And could I get one more handheld mic? Because Rohini likes to beat us up a lot, and finance never beats you up, right? You spend too much money, yeah. Okay.
I'm going to try and be nice today.
You're going to be nice today? Okay. All right. So what I'd like to ask you guys is, Paul, as you see this, what are you going to do in the data center infrastructure to meet this goal in 2013?
So we have 2 main projects that we're targeting for this. This year we're bringing on our new data center in Salt Lake City. It's a new Tier 2 6 megawatt facility that highly efficient with a traditional raised floor and a large container farm. Secondly, one of our biggest drivers has also been our, with that inventory, our colo consolidation project. So it's moving out of our expensive co-location facilities into our own facilities throughout the portfolio.
Great. What are you going to do about the power sourcing, Paul?
So, it's cake. So, this year also. So the 650 kilowatts of solar that Dean mentioned came online actually in December. That'll start to help. And then in the latter part of this year, we bring on our 6 megawatts of Bloom Energy, clean energy. And that'll be a big step in the right direction for us. So,
excellent.
That's it.
Cost-wise, what do you think it's going to impact you?
Well, it's not all about cost, no.
She can throw that at you, I know. So no.
Let's see, I'm looking at 10% reduction in cost.
Cost per transaction, yes.
Right.
All right, so Jeremy, what are you going to do in this? You own the hardware decisions within the organization.
There's so many things that I want to do, but the big focus is that my staff is looking all the way between component level specifications all the way through modular data center deployments, and we're optimizing to cost targets and performance targets. We're also consciously going out to our software developers, which I'm going to point at you, because we understand that the hardware designed by itself may not be able to achieve the goals that we're looking at. A simple example of that is if you remember back in the days when we had single-core systems, when we went to multi-core systems, there's usually a little bit of a lag of the software development to say I can take advantage of that hardware capability. So the tighter I am with that relationship and the design of my hardware, the better off the overall infrastructure is going to be. I'm also pragmatically looking at keeping cost targets, and making sure that the servers themselves don't increase in cost over time. They stay relatively flat, and I increase the performance that they're giving. And that sort of matches the Moore's Law type approach of what we have in any given IT infrastructure.
So why would it be that density makes a difference in any of this? We've talked about density for a long time.
There's a lot of things that come to mind when I think of density. One is we have an incredible speed of deployment for a typical 48U rack. eBay's deploying 2. Well, you may be deploying 1. That's because we're getting 96 servers per that rack. For our data center build-outs and construction, we're looking at that data center to achieve the 28 to 33 kilowatts per rack. And again, that's an uber-efficient, dense, focused solution that's component driven to optimize the performance of the applications that will reside there. So density is really important for us. It also allows us to think about cooling in different ways. So it'll, again, tie back into modular data center solutions and white space traditional data center solutions.
Excellent. So here we have the data centers, how they're sourced with power, how they're efficiently built and operated. Now we have the stuff inside the data centers that's matched to the application. But you're a coder. You write software. So what are you going to do about this target?
All right. First of all, I think with this concept, and I also just learned about this concept of DSE, by the way. So we are talking about a whole new breed of tools that can break down and profile what the coder codes into what really does mean to the organization. We used to have profiling tools that tells you the efficiency, the performance alone of your software. We have monitoring tools that tell you how good is your CPU utilization, okay, how good is your memory utilization, but none of that in the past has been narrowed down or broken down to what does it really cost you. So I see that software engineers will have to look at all these aspects that new breeds of tools provide you in order to say, my actions that I did on the software, does it mean it increases the cost on the infrastructure, or does it decrease the cost? How do I optimize it? How do I really make sure that I do not increase the cost while giving the users the SLA, the user experience that the user deserves?
Absolutely. So think of the balance here. And let me give you an example of what's happened, because we haven't been sitting still and then we're just going to release this metric. Things have been going on in the infrastructure to get the numbers we have already. For one, we had some software developers adjust the memory consumed in an application in one of our larger pools. Okay, a pool is a group of servers that's serving a function inside of eBay. That memory tweak removed 400 servers out of that pool. Just by shrinking the amount of memory that's consumed by the application, 400 servers were removed. That means we had almost a megawatt of power removed from consumption. We also did not have to tech refresh over $2 million worth of servers. So think about the result of that. We now have the same amount of transactions done with less equipment, which means we're doing more transactions for the kilowatt hours consumed in the infrastructure. We're freeing up capacity in the data centers. So one example. Now, we battle a lot. We partner a lot. I'm sorry.
But we love each other.
Yes, that's right. It's all good. It's a love-hate relationship. She loves to hate me. And, okay. But we have a really tight tie with finance because we're on the revenue side of the business. What we do inside of the infrastructure affects what outcome happens in the business. Our margins, all those things. So what does this metric and what does this goal mean to you?
So 3 things from a finance standpoint, what I really look forward to in making a year successful. A is accountability and responsibility. So these guys own different things, and there are some people back in the offices that have different areas of responsibility. How does this link to each one of them is very interesting. everyone can look at this metric and say, this is how it is mined. So there is an accountability and a responsibility in their own areas of work, which kind of brings together all their efforts towards one goal, which our CTO can stand up for and say, this is what I'm going to deliver at the end of the year. The second thing that's really important for me is measurability, very clear measurability. Any goal that doesn't have a clear measurable parameter is meaningless, right? We all want to change the world in some ways, but as long as we can measure it, great, but mostly we can't, right? So measurability is the best thing about this. Every quarter we go in, see what we are doing. It tells us right away what we are doing. It's so simple to measure. We can measure it all the time, which I love about it. And largely it's the simplicity of how it comes together beautifully for us. The third thing is communication. A large part of finance is just communication. Communication to investors, communication to the CEOs, et cetera, communication down to the employees. The communication needs to be very simple, it needs to be crisp, and it needs to be very clear. So for me, what this does is it translates all the complex metrics which we struggled over the last couple of years to explain to all the leaders of the business, PUEs, hardware efficiencies, software usage, et cetera, et cetera. It kind of brings it together in a meaningful way for them, which relates to revenue and transactions and what the business is doing. So yes, we are increasing our costs, but why are we increasing our costs? This is related to the volume of the business. But now, how does that contribute to our growth, and how do we, per unit, bring the cost down is really the key message we are trying to send. So if I show one number, I get the attention of everybody, and they remember it, it sticks. So I think on all these three parameters, this does beautifully, and that's why I think I'm so excited about it.
Excellent. Let me just summarize again what this means. The digital service efficiency metric is the miles per gallon measurement for eBay's technical infrastructure. Okay, and I'm specifically stating this is what we're using to measure our business, as you've heard throughout this. It is measuring eBay.com as a single system, of course, and we are tuning the engine based on this metric. And it is a consumption-based metric. Our users are driving our engine, and this is what's happening when they drive our engine, and how we tune it based on what they do with their behaviors. And again, we're not trying to tell everybody how this should be done. What we want to do is share our data, share our results, share our methodology. And notice, DSE is a methodology for the industry. It is a metric for us. The next thing is, the reason we're involved in the Green Grid is to have these dialogues, is to have this conversation, is to help drive the agenda, drive the efficiency, drive productivity within technical infrastructure. So that's why we're sharing this content. That's why I'm in the advisory council. That's why my team participates. That's why we care about what's going on in the Green Grid. Our business is a representation of the digital economy, and we want to be able to share the productivity of that business. And just so you know, we have a solution brief that defines this paper. Hold on, Henry. So it's at dse.ebay.com. Okay, that is the solution brief. It's 6 pages. It's an easy read. It ties everything together that we talked about today. And then you can also send email to dse@ebay.com if you've got more conversations you want to have or have more information. And that dashboard is live. If somebody wants to check on their phone, it should be live right now. It's not live yet? It's live. Excellent. Okay. If there's a few bumps in there, just bear with us. But the data is all there, and that's what we want people to do, is click through it, think about it, ask questions, and start to have the dialogue starting here at the Green Grid. All right, questions?
I was just wondering, were there any key insights in terms of being able to translate the business targets, which was elegantly stated with regards to buy and sell, and just translate that down to things like URL searches and so forth? Because I think that any insight in doing that, when you have a different business, different outcome per se, may help improve this or allow this to be adopted by other outputs, if you will.
Sure.
Right? If I'm making chips, I'm going to have a different set of criteria associated with how that translates to the number of devices that I ship out, per se, and so forth.
Yes, and let me just go right there and I'll answer that. If you look at the performance on the dashboard itself, so this is not qualitative. This isn't comparing like searches between Bing and Microsoft or whatever else. It is quantitative. This is a quantitative measurement of what's actually happening in your infrastructure, regardless of what you're doing. You're delivering something electronically. And so I would say insights for us, how many nights and hours and hours and hours do we sit there and debate back and forth how to do this? We were doing a user-based metric. And then there were 100 different ways we were thinking about doing it. But it still came down to the simplest way, to what Rohini was saying, is to represent it up. You need common currency. If anybody is interested in looking at applying this in their business, the first thing you have to do is define the services you have. Pretty simple. Then you define the currencies that you have underneath them to measure it and have consistent transactions. Then from there you start to tie it back into the business. I understand my services, I understand the transactions, I now can get my costs and things and be able to represent it back up the chain. But this is very interesting to me. How many times have you seen data centers, hardware, software, and finance sitting on the same stage together? I think this is the first time I've ever seen it, personally, in the industry. And yay! And luckily, at eBay, we're small enough but big enough that we can actually have these conversations. But we want to share this so that you guys know that this is possible. And the fact that you've heard about this yesterday, and I said, hey, join us on stage. We don't have all the answers yet, but that's the beauty of it. There's a smart mind right there that does a lot of stuff on our cloud platform. And now he's thinking about how he's going to get that metric driven. So this means we'll engage everybody in the company to figure out what knobs they're going to turn to be able to meet these goals. So you got a question? Oh, sorry.
By the way, Dean, great metric. I think it's certainly something that we could look at in FutureWise from company to company to observe something of this sort. One thing I've noticed from the data that you've presented is that there seems to be a 60% change in variance from quarter to quarter. And obviously that means that there's some overcapacity built into productions. But I would say that potentially one goal that you could sort of look at is the reduction of variance to sort of achieve better optimization from quarter to quarter.
Would you like to hit the DR thing? Yeah? Great question.
So from a DR perspective, right, eBay has this infrastructure across 3 sites. And depending on how we do our split and do our performance, we have the ability to tune the application side and the infrastructure side of how that balances. So that harkens to your question. In addition to that, we're also looking at upscaling and downscaling the systems in the future, so that as our load increases, our systems can respond in turn, right?
And you can say it's called overclocking. Yeah. It's the gas pedal on the hardware.
Conscious of Henry. Overclocking or permanent turbo boost or what have you. You can call it many things. But that dynamicism, right, which you kind of see in virtualization, we want that across all our applications. We want to be able to, on the non-peak, scale our systems down or repurpose our systems so that when we are designed to go for the peak at the peak, we're achieving that. We're achieving the performance for our end users. But when we're not doing that, we're doing something else that's very useful.
The other thing that I love is my boss, right? He was running a platform before. His name is Shri. And now he took on operations. So he owns the entire stack, right? Everything that delivers for developers to go back and do what they need to do. And he looked at the numbers and things in here and he goes, overcapacity, DR. We got a lot of servers in there to handle the peak of the peak. What happens if we didn't buy any more servers this year? What happens if we didn't buy any more servers this year? Very interesting question. There's a lot of capacity in there. We know that there is waste in here. And I'll tell you one other thing, that we have a list of fame and a list of shame. It's the same list. It's just a button at the top that says fame or shame. It is every pool. A pool is a group of servers in our infrastructure. Every pool stack ranked by utilization peak over a 3-month period. So you do shame and it's the worst to best, right? Fame is best to worst. We're targeting the bottom 20% of those. We did a quick roll on it. We found 1,000 servers, physical servers in there that had less than 1% utilization over a 3-month period. There's something wrong there. But the point is we're going to have a conversation about every one of those frickin' servers and find out what it's doing. And if there is a business justification for it, we'll know what it is. We have a $20 million operational excellence target next year, or this year. $20 million bucks. Where do you find it? You start tuning these knobs. We don't need that many servers. We increase utilization. We look at software optimization. We look at what we're doing in the data centers. The point is, we can see the entire stack and start to turn those knobs. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
I'm Tony Greenberg from Ramprate.
Hey, Tony.
Wow. This is absolutely a redefinition of the entire conversation of IT in business language across every discipline. There's nothing like this that has happened before. And I apologize if you don't have the right answer. Where are the flaws associated with that transparency? How do we have a call to the industry to refine their own vertical metrics that will drive, let's say, less error in these numbers?
So when was PUE started? 2007, right? 6 years now that PUE's been out. I think almost everybody in this room had lots of violent discussions about measurement and how and if we should ever share numbers and those kind of things. PUE wasn't meant to be a metric and something to compare. But what PUE has done is drive down the energy consumption and technical infrastructure. Regardless of who, regardless of how, it has had a major impact on the world of how much power is consumed. What we're trying to do is say, PUE is awesome. It's one piece of the puzzle. We are going to go back and drive down the energy consumed on all of the things that we do. Because we know that our business is growing. We've gone from 160 million active items for sale to over 500 million in less than 3 years. Right? We broke 100 million users last year. I mean, it just, the volumes are going up because it is the way that the digital economy is driven. Everybody's on their devices, everybody's consuming, everybody's impatient, everybody wants their information now, everybody's watching videos, whatever. All that is just going to continue to compound. And what we have a responsibility as an industry, I believe, is to figure out how to optimize that infrastructure. We have a responsibility to our shareholders to make sure that we're only spending what we have to. We have a responsibility to our customers to deliver the most efficient service to them possible. And we have a responsibility to the planet to make sure that we're going to make every transaction we're doing as clean and green as possible. Thank you very much, folks, for the questions and for listening.